prepared to make a start. Now, Jess, are you ready if I quietly make a start? And darling, just before we start formally, you are a magnificent human. It is our privilege to supervise you. Good luck. Okay, we ready? This is
Yes.
so exciting. Okay, so colleagues, hello. If you don't know me, my name is Tara Brabazon. I'm thrilled that you are here. There's a very attractive man next to me. Is Jamie Quinton. We are many things, but we are also the supervisors of a remarkable human being. But before we get to that remarkable human being, I want to present an acknowledgement of country, acknowledging all the traditional owners of all the lands on which we meet today, elders past, present and emerging, and any Indigenous colleagues with us today. So we need to thank a few people. We need to firstly thank and congratulate Jess for surviving and producing some innovative, remarkable research that will change your life in this next hour of power. But we also need to thank two remarkable assessors, Dr. Leanne McRae and Dr. Sarah Casey, remarkable scholars who have come in as external assessors because we do quality, and external assessors who are doing this job for nothing. And we learn a great deal about them as human beings, them as academics, them as scholars, and particularly their role and place in enabling quality education. For your service, colleagues, we are very, very grateful. I want to also acknowledge all the wonderful friends that have joined us, the people I haven't seen for some months. It's quite emotional to see you all. We are so thrilled that you're part of what is the final chapter of this remarkable bit of research. Can I also particularly thank, there's a large number of people who have joined us today on a public holiday. So we have interrupted your Chardonnay experience, for which we're grateful. Perhaps we have interrupted your Chardonnay experience, but we'll party on from. So colleagues, the gig today, the milestone today has three parts. Jess is going to be presenting her remarkable research. It's quite an exciting presentation. We'll then be moving to the direct questions from the assessors, Leanne and Sarah, until they are satisfied and content that they believe this project is outstanding and will be completed in the next few months. And then we'll open it up to the crew. We'll open it up for all of you for questions. So there'll be no secret bit of this milestone. There won't be people going away into a separate room and working out what's going to happen. Everything is overt and transparent because that's the kind of people that we are. Hey, Jamie. You can just say hi, everybody.
It's great to see everyone. Yeah, great. Good luck, Jess.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, team. So without any further conversation, thank you all for being you. Jess, good luck, Angel. Batter up.
All right, thank you, Tara. All right, so I think you all know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about advancing breast cancer prevention. So welcome, everyone, and thank you all for being here. Undertaking a PhD can be quite a lonely journey sometimes, but it is certainly one that's best shared. So I really appreciate you for all being here and for being a part of it. All right, sorry, it's a little clunky in the slide transitions, so just hang with me. All right, so what I'm going to present with you is the research, and then I'm going to provide some insights into what it's been like undertaking this PhD. And then finally, I will conclude with the sprint to the finish line and what steps are still left to get there. All right, so this PhD has started like most PhDs do, I guess. It's all been about unicorns and rainbows. So in my first year of my PhD, I was convinced I was going to save the world. And well, everything went pretty smoothly that first year. I made rapid progress. I completed a systematic review. I developed a solid proposal, and I even started data collection with thousands of Australian women. And then it was like the whole world got turned upside down. The pandemic hit, which fundamentally changed the way that we live, work, and interact. And this was right at the start of my planned community-based data collection. I designed a large, ambitious, multi-phase sequential project. I had created partnerships with the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. I had a local government on board, and I had a community drug action team ready to help co-design and implement an intervention. But these were difficult times and things had to change. I either had to wait it out or I had to adapt. And I'm really glad I didn't try and wait out the pandemic. So I made the best of it. I did what I could to create certainty in a world of chaos. I worked with women, and together we sought to better understand alcohol advertising targeted at women online. When we think about alcohol as a problem, we think about people who look like this, or perhaps like this. Since 1988, there has been strong and convincing evidence of alcohol as being carcinogenic. Alcohol is a direct cause of cancer, and this risk increases with any amount of alcohol. But importantly, there is a dose-response relationship. So the more alcohol consumed, the higher the risk. The World Health Organization has allocated the highest category of evidence, a group 1 carcinogen, to alcohol, the same level of evidence as for tobacco and for asbestos. Yet we still have very limited public protections, much less than for tobacco and asbestos. We still use alcohol routinely. It is saturated into the Australian way of life. And if we want to translate the evidence into meaningful change and breast cancer risk reduction, we need to understand the complexities of why women drink. We need to understand how women navigate alcohol risk, and we need to acknowledge how our beliefs and our perceptions of alcohol are influenced by the alcohol industry. When we think about alcohol, these extreme down and out images serve a purpose. They muddy the evidence. A focus on addiction and on short-term consequences and obvious alcohol harms allows us to other people who have a problem. These people, they're not like us. We can drink alcohol in moderation, and therefore there's little risk of harm to us. But thinking about alcohol in this way serves us. It allows us to enjoy the euphoric effects of alcohol without listening to that little doubting voice that whispers, perhaps you should slow down. It allows us to block health messaging about the risks of alcohol because we consume in moderation, so leave us alone. These perceptions of alcohol harm who it occurs to and at how much volume needs to be consumed before health impacts are all significant barriers to alcohol-related breast cancer prevention. Research has found that even low and moderate levels of drinking can increase breast cancer risk. However, this risk message is completely at odds with how we perceive alcohol. The carcinogenic nature of alcohol has been known for over 20 years. However, this has failed to translate into significant behavioural policy and practice change. As a result, women have not benefited from this research and by extension have been exposed to unnecessary breast cancer risk. And this is where my research makes a significant and an original contribution to knowledge. It provides a roadmap and a theoretical understanding as to how we can effectively intervene to reduce breast cancer risk. We know that reducing alcohol consumption in women will reduce breast cancer risk. However, we don't know how to do this. My PhD contributes in understanding both at an individual and a structural level as to the function of alcohol and how the perceptions of alcohol are formed by the alcohol industry. This research illuminates the barriers to effective risk reduction and provides solutions on how we can reduce breast cancer risk. Alcohol serves a purpose for women. It has benefits. And while women navigate the complexity of life with the clashing expectations and juggling of family and career demands, alcohol provides a socially sanctioned way to help us cope and to relax. Alcohol helps us to stay calm. It numbs us and it quells that existential angst while we ponder the midlife question of, is this all there is to life? These beliefs around alcohol-related harm are shaped by social norms and corporate constructions. Advertising is how corporations persuade us to respond in a certain way to a product. Big alcohol are a powerful force in shaping our beliefs and perceptions of alcohol. The findings on how advertising is targeted at women online, the strategies used, and the impact of alcohol advertising are all areas that I will present today. Essentially, I will provide an answer to the overarching research questions. What are the individual and structural drivers of alcohol consumption for women? And what strategies are likely to be effective in reducing alcohol-related breast cancer risk? I do want to acknowledge that this can be a difficult and an emotive topic to discuss. I, like many people, have lost friends and family members and have seen those I care about be impacted by breast cancer. And I want to share a story. I remember standing with a group of women, ironically, in the car park of a pub, preparing to undertake a group social run. The leader this day was a woman who was living with breast cancer. While she was welcoming us and discussing where we were going to run that day, she abruptly lifted up her shirt to show where her breasts used to be. She had had a double mastectomy and wanted to tell everyone how important it was to get their boobs checked and to get a mammogram. Sorry if I shocked you, she said, but this message is important. Now, this was extremely confronting, as I'm sure it is somewhat for you now. It hit home hard, but I couldn't help but think, why didn't she say more? Surely prevention and detection should be the message. I know prevention isn't always possible, but that doesn't mean that it should be silenced. Most literature focuses on understanding young people's alcohol use, and yet women in their midlife stage, are drinking more than their younger counterparts. And whilst alcohol consumption is high with men, breast cancer is much less common in males, and therefore that is outside the scope of this research. Women aged 35 to 54 are at the highest proportional cancer risk due to excessive alcohol intake. And this age group, herein referred to as women, is the focus of this research. A recent systematic review published by Kersey and colleagues in 2022 concluded that further research was needed to understand the meaning of alcohol and the function it had for women. That an important aspect of population-level alcohol risk reduction was the need to denormalize drinking. The review concluded that a greater understanding of the function of alcohol was needed before effective prevention was possible. Three dominant streams of thought inform this research. The first is that the evidence shows there is no safe levels of drinking. Even consumption at low levels, which was previously considered to be safe, is known to now increase cancer risk. The second important aspect is that alcohol consumption patterns have changed and women are now drinking more, and it's moving towards a gender convergence in alcohol use and harm. Whilst women are drinking more, the literature has focused on men and young people or pregnant women, and significant motivations, gender, and life stage differences exist with these populations. In midlife, women experience significant identity, family, and gender role changes, indicating there is an important knowledge gap, and that why women are drinking, understanding that is a crucial first step. Public awareness is low, with just under half of Australians identifying alcohol as a risk factor for cancer. And concerningly, there is lower awareness in groups that are most at risk, heavier drinkers. Mayer and colleagues interviewed women for an alcohol and breast cancer study, and they asked women to identify risk factors for breast cancer. And diet, physical activity, and stress were stated. But interestingly, this was despite being told of the alcohol and breast cancer link prior to the interview. And yet the participants still did not identify alcohol. This suggests that increasing awareness is more complex than risk messaging, and there is a need to alter the perception that women have of alcohol. So the first study that I want to talk to you about was a qualitative study where I interviewed 22 women. They were regular drinkers. They were in the age group, and I defined regular as being consuming alcohol twice a week or more. There was also a small subset of this group who did drink at that level previously, but now had stopped consuming alcohol. And so this research was underpinned by existential philosophy, and in particular, Sartre's theory of bad faith. So existentialism focuses on the major themes of freedom and responsibility. The degree to which people have choice and individual responsibility is a debated and hotly contested area in public health. Indeed, the C word, choice, is something that is not said lightly. Given the pandemic context and the social distancing restrictions, I felt that working at a community level was too risky. However, I was reluctant to take on an individual behavioural approach to a population level issue. Existential theory posits that we live in a godless world, that we have no creator, and that as humans, we are conscious beings and that we choose our own essence, our meaning. The famous Sartre phrase, existence before essence, states that we are born and we create our own essence, our meaning for our own lives. Humans have radical freedom over their lives, and our lives are what we make of them. This is one of the hardest things about being free. We have no holy rule book to follow, nothing to tell us how to live. What is important is that we live authentically. Bad faith is a Sartre theory that asserts that if we take actions based on self-denial, thinking that things have to be a certain way, or closed off to other possibilities, that we are not accepting that we are free as human beings. If we float along without really thinking about our choices and do things that don't align with our values, then we are living in bad faith. This theory offers a way to consider the purpose or the essence of alcohol from the perspectives of women, rather than adopting a health risk or a nanny state public health view. If we can understand why women are drinking and what they value, this may help to frame meaningful messages about breast cancer prevention and provide avenues for intervention. So in this qualitative study, the participants were recruited through sending out email invitations for people that had signed up in the first phase of the national online survey, which I'll tell you about soon, but that is how the participants were recruited. And so the interviews had two parts. The first part asked about the context of their life and asked about their drinking history, from their initiation to their current drinking habits. So the whole life course perspective. And the second part of the interview asked about what's important to them through a series of meaning in life questions, seeking to understand what brings them joy, connection to others, and their biggest worries. This was followed by a series of questions about freedom, influence of societal expectations on their life choices, and their perceived level of freedom. All transcripts were imported into NVivo for analysis, and firstly, the data was coded inductively to develop a coding framework. Broad codes were generated to build up the coding frame, and these were then discussed with the broader research team. And the inductive approach resulted in data-driven patterns of meaning, themes related to the research question about the purpose of alcohol in women's lives. And then secondly, deductive coding was used through the theory-driven approach to test the utility of Sartre's theory of bad faith, where the experiences of women were filtered through a theoretical lens with guiding questions such as, does the purpose of alcohol fit in line with their life values? So given that I have 7 studies to present as part of this beast of a PhD project, and that we have limited time, I'm going to present some selected results. So the results I'm going to provide are the key highlights which help to address the research questions. So in this particular study, I'm going to present the dominant themes of the purpose of alcohol and give you some examples of good and bad faith drinkers and how they could be used in breast cancer prevention. Alcohol has a euphoric effect as it increases the brain's release of chemicals that make us feel good, the neurotransmitter dopamine. Alcohol also upregulates GABAergic neurotransmitters and helps to release our endogenous opioids. And as a result, we feel good and relaxed. And unsurprisingly, given the impact on brain chemistry, the enjoyable sensations that alcohol provides were valued by women. For some women, alcohol served multiple functions in their lives. The role of alcohol changed depending on the social context. Alcohol was a reward, a way to celebrate achievements, but it was also something that could simply be enjoyed unearned, an indulgence. They were more flexible in their approach and seemed to accept that alcohol served different purposes depending on the social context. Alone and at home, alcohol was a reward they could enjoy after working hard. But equally, alcohol could be enjoyed as an indulgent experience enjoyed with others. Whilst the ability of alcohol to reduce inhibitions is not new, how women experience this side effect is unique. Some women describe the freedom they felt from drinking as a positive that gave them some space. It was a way to let loose and to show their true selves. It was a way to cast off the shackles of responsibility and just be. Drinking released them from the roles that they perform. Interestingly, some women talked about how different types of alcohol serve different functions. Spirits, when used, let loose. But when they wanted to relax in a social setting, they used beer so that they didn't overconsume and become at risk of losing control. So alcohol served diverse purposes for women. It can be used to wind down with a partner, or when life stresses present, it can be used as a coping mechanism. Over time and with conscious decision-making, the drinking can be reduced again, and it can serve the primary function of relaxation. What I think is the most interesting here is the conscious decision-making that this participant describes. The awareness that she talks about her drinking and how she sought to make an active change and how she used alcohol. I would propose that this is an example of a good faith drinker. This participant made active choices about her consumption and how they aligned with her values of needing authentic connection, unwinding with her husband. Once she realized she was drinking in a way that didn't serve her, she reduced her consumption. This is a prime example of a good faith drinker. And I think this type of drinker, we should just let them be. They need to be aware of the breast cancer risk. However, they are already self-limiting in their drinking. All right, so these participants describe how alcohol enabled them to think clearly and to relax. The second participant talks about how relaxation without alcohol was foreign, that alcohol was an essential part of the ritual of relaxation. The lines become blurred here between the conscious use of a product and how the product may be controlling them. It presents some of the challenges to effective alcohol risk messaging. How do we ask women to make a change when they perceive alcohol as being essential to them? I propose that we can do this through understanding their life values. Using such as theory of bad faith, women who are drinking with less intention and in a way that is not in line with what is important to them would be termed bad faith drinkers. This is a group of women who may be more open to prevention. This group of women are not drinking in a way that supports their life goals, and therefore they may be more open to reducing their drinking and living more authentically. By understanding why women drink and what is important to them, existential theory presents an exciting opportunity for breast cancer prevention, with both short-term benefits of living a better life and preventing the cancers of tomorrow. Okay, so now I'm going to present some of the structural drivers of alcohol consumption. Despite improvements in healthcare and reductions in cardiovascular and cancer mortality in the United States, deaths of despair has contributed to an overall increase in mortality. This is strange. We have seen overall mortality decreasing for decades. And Case and Deaton found these potentially avoidable deaths have been driven by a particular group: white, non-Hispanic, middle-aged, working-class men with lower education levels. Whilst there was an overall decrease of mortality in Australia in 2020, there was an increase in alcohol-induced deaths by 8%, which included alcohol poisoning and chronic conditions such as alcoholic liver disease. The rate of alcohol-induced deaths for females is at its highest point in the last 10 years, and there has been a 12% increase compared to only a 7% increase in males. So whilst males do experience more of the effects and the impacts of alcohol, women are catching up. So this study examines how the deaths of despair are manifesting in Australian women in relation to alcohol use. Okay, so this is the survey that I mentioned before, the National Online Survey, and I had 1,723 women participate, and they were all between the ages of 35 and 55 years old. I don't want to dwell too much on this. I want to skip to the results. All right, so the majority of women who had previously consumed alcohol, and they drank at a mean of 2.6 standard drinks on any typical day when they did drink. Now, to reduce the risk of harm from alcohol, the Australian government now recommends that Australians limit their use of alcohol. And importantly, they have no more than 4 standard drinks on any one day. But 1 in 4 Australians reportedly drink beyond this guideline. And while this may not cause immediate harm, it does increase the risk of long-term health issues. Understanding the socio-demographics of women drinking above the guideline can help us to target interventions to reduce these harms. I found that women without a university-level education were more likely to drink in excess. Women living in areas of lower skilled and lower education levels were more likely to drink above the guidelines. However, work industry was not significantly associated with drinking above the guidelines, and this indicates that the broader context of the community in which people lived had more impact on consumption than the industry that they worked in. The motivation for drinking was important. Those who drink to cope and those who drink more regularly are more likely to consume more than 4 standard drinks per day, and that women in rural areas were more likely to drink above the guidelines. Education was associated with motivation for drinking. Participants which had a higher education level were more likely to drink to relax and more likely to connect with others. And those without a university level education were more likely to be binge or everyday drinkers. In addition, the volume of alcohol consumed was significantly associated with education. Women who had a university level education consumed less alcohol when they drank. Case and Deaton proposed that white working class people with lower levels of education are undertaking self-destructive behaviours, which are slowly killing them. The study found that education and rurality are associated with drinking at higher levels. However, class and ethnicity does not match with Case and Deaton's theory. Case and Deaton theorised that education is a key factor in explaining the deaths of despair, and those without a university level education have fewer choices in terms of education and employment, and are more vulnerable to the impacts of technological change. Technological advances reduce the demand for unskilled labour, and the least qualified workers disproportionately bear the impact of deindustrialisation. Deindustrialisation creates a climate where the less educated workers can be left with a redundant skill set. The trend is particularly impactful in countries such as Australia, which have a highly educated population with more people with a bachelor's level degree or higher than the OECD average. The analysis supports the theory of deaths of despair with education as a key variable, which influences the pattern of drinking and the volume of consumption. Given the higher reported volume of consumption on drinking days and the higher frequency of drinking, those with lower education could be at higher risk from deaths of despair through alcoholic liver disease or breast cancer. The mechanism prescribed by Case and Deaton in regard to a lack of choices driving deaths of despair with people with lower education levels are similar to what's experienced by women, and women without a university level education are worse off as they experience the double impacts at the intersection of oppression. Patriarchal beliefs all serve to keep women in their place, serving men. Women are held in positions of disadvantage as evidenced through the gender pay gap and the increasing burden of household and childcare responsibilities. Women can be entrapped in unhappy marriages without the access to financial resources to be able to change their situation. Patriarchal beliefs cause power imbalances and result in reduced access to resources for women and reduced social mobility, which Case and Deaton explain leads to deaths of despair. All right, so we've covered the individual and the structural drivers of alcohol consumption. Now we're going to move into answering the second research question. Scientists have been reporting on the carcinogenic nature of alcohol for decades, but this is not translated into reduced population level risk. Nevertheless, the involvement of the impacted population with researchers has been suggested as a solution to this common research translation failure. In breast cancer, we have a highly motivated and engaging health topic. Think about how many times you have seen people participating in breast cancer awareness or fundraising events. It is one of the most visible and community mobilized health issues. People care deeply and they want to do something about it. This is a perfect situation for participatory research. Two large fields of literature exist in alcohol and in breast cancer. However, the intersection of these fields, particularly in regards to population level prevention, remains within its infancy. Add to this the additional nuance of research approaches that work with impacted communities through participatory research, and we have a very small but interesting pool of literature. And this pool of literature had not been systematically reviewed. And so I did it. And I published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. In the review, I wanted to understand what participatory research had previously been completed in breast cancer lifestyle risk factors, had it been effective, and how. Due to the intersection of these large research fields and the desire to capture every piece of relevant research, I designed a highly sensitive search. I screened close to 6,000 abstracts, reviewed over 6,000 full text articles, and we ended up with 8 articles in the review. The inclusion criteria included interventions where the study population were included in at least one step in the research process, and articles which reported results of alcohol or other breast cancer prevention lifestyle risk factors of smoking, physical activity, and diet. And these studies were based on adults. Given the small field of literature and the review question, a mixed method synthesis allowed for an understanding of the effectiveness and also the barriers and enablers. The review question required both qualitative and quantitative research designs to address what works and how, and therefore a convergent, integrated approach was most appropriate. So the literature was dominated by alcohol use interventions, with 7 of the 8 studies. The exception to this was a single study which focused on nutrition and breast cancer prevention. The benefits of participatory research were the diverse perspectives that were brought into the research team, which influenced the agenda setting, the intervention design, and the evaluation process. The partnership between the academics and the communities allowed for a more flexible and culturally tailored solution, and they were able to address some of the barriers that the community faced when they were trying to improve diet or to reduce alcohol consumption. Now, research is not conducted in a vacuum. Well, certainly not public health research. And an intervention is always placed into a social context. And the context is going to influence the research effectiveness. And participatory approaches, where the lived experience of the communities being integrated into the research team, allowed for a much greater synergy to be developed between the intervention and the context. And this contributed to effectiveness. The findings provide evidence that women were receptive and responsive to the participatory approach, and that their buy-in is essential if we're going to address socially entrenched behaviours such as alcohol consumption. Participatory research presents opportunities for future interventions to intervene on modifiable risk factors for breast cancer, but as of yet, there had not been any interventions which had explored alcohol risk in relation to breast cancer. So I did some participatory research. The aim of this study was to examine the utility of citizen science as an approach in engaging women in alcohol and breast cancer prevention research, and to understand the exposure and the impact of online alcohol advertising. While citizen science has become a popular way to engage with the public in terms of the environment, with volunteers exploring biodiversity research, everything from measuring rainfall to counting birds in their backyard, citizen science remains an emerging approach in public health research. While citizen science has been used in public health to look at nutrition and physical activity, it had not been utilised in relation to alcohol advertising. This represents an area of originality for this PhD. I completed the first alcohol advertising citizen science project and published it in Health Promotion International, sharing the knowledge gained through this process to encourage others to be more participatory in their research, and showing how this could be done through readily available research tools. I described the benefits and the challenges to uniting with the public in the research process, and how what we can do to optimise this collaborative approach to both provide meaningful engagement and to also improve research outcomes. Whilst the benefits of community involvement in public health research are clear, knowledge about how to implement citizen science approaches was needed. To understanding alcohol advertising exposure in women, a registration survey was completed which recorded their socio-demographic characteristics, their social media use, and their alcohol drinking behaviours. Citizen scientists have the ability to contribute across the entire research process. But in this case, it was done during the data collection phase. While higher levels of public engagement are possible, engagement for engagement's sake is not advantageous to the public or to academic researchers. Meaningful engagement results when the resources are available to support genuine democratic participation, where the public can engage in issues that matter to them and which in turn strengthen the research. The research team must have sufficient time and skills to allow for this genuine participation to occur. And in this project, the public involvement increased the time that was needed during the planning phase and in the data collection. I had to navigate logistical issues such as data platform selection and the need for communication strategies. And this all increased the complexity compared to if we'd just undertaken a purely research-driven data collection process, which is what some other studies have completed. But this study was richer due to the citizen scientists' contributions. However, I recognise that this level of engagement was not feasible across the whole research process. The higher level of engagement described by King here in this diagram by the people was not well suited to conducting research during a pandemic with social restrictions. So greater public involvement was possible and may have resulted in some stronger translation. However, this needs additional time across the whole cycle. And for this study, the investment of time and resources at the data collection phase using a with the people approach gave the optimal return on investment. But an interesting thing happened, which I didn't anticipate. 75% of women, they completed the registration survey, but they did not go on to upload an image. So anecdotally, I was told, I signed up for your research, but I didn't see any advertising, so I couldn't upload. And sadly, I didn't collect any data from these people. It wasn't built into the original research design. And if I could do it all over again, I would have. This is one of the challenges with this type of design. We didn't know if they weren't exposed to advertising or if they simply forgot to screenshot the image and upload it, which could have happened in the context of their busy lives. And we didn't have the greatest technology solution. The uploading process did require some effort. It had several steps involved in it. It wasn't integrated into their phone like an app would be. They had to remember to see the images, to screenshot them, then they had to go to their email, click on the survey link, and then go in and upload the image and answer a few questions about it. So we asked them, what type of beverage was in the advertising? Where did you find it? How noticeable, prominent, appealing, and how much it made them motivated to drink. So in citizen science projects, many people register for that, they do the initial survey, but they don't go on to complete the research tasks. A research project with a similar focus, but using a different method through ecological momentary assessment, which is a very traditional passive participant type of research. In this study, they gave people 3 daily prompts on their smartphones to observe their environment and look for alcohol advertising, and only 17% reported seeing online advertising. Whilst the study I did was participatory and it used a convenience sample, I had a greater proportion of women uploading images at around 25%. And they had very minimal prompting. So this could indicate that this sample of women were highly exposed to alcohol advertising compared to previous studies. But it could also indicate that there was a willingness to engage and a strong motivation to participate in the data collection process. I analysed the differences between the women who uploaded and those who did not by socio-demographic characteristics, and there was no significance found, no significant differences between those two groups. All right, what I did find is that women are excellent scientists, as I'm sure we all know. So they were able to follow instructions and they collected relevant data with almost a 90% acceptance rate of the images. The citizen scientists and the academic researcher, me, independently coded the images for brand and image type, and the inter-rater reliability analysis found an almost perfect agreement. Women were excellent scientists, both in data collection and in classification tasks. Alcohol, oh, I just lost my spot. Sorry. Alcohol retailing is diverse. And there are major players such as supermarket chains sitting alongside a myriad of wineries who retail directly to the public. We also have alcohol delivery services, we have bars and we have clubs, we have festivals and we have tourism campaigns, and they all feature alcohol. This variety and industry alcohol promotion suggests a saturated Australian culture and a range of advertising exposures. And this likely contributed to the very easy picking, high acceptance rate of uploaded images, and the very low levels of duplication found in the image dataset. Big Alcohol has stated that women are an important new market as young people have decreased their consumption. The use of influencers and social media to reach women has been documented through research by Vic Health and through Curtin University and the WA Cancer Council. Whilst there is some regulation of television advertising times to protect children, this is not designed to protect women, and social media platforms are largely unregulated. From research on young people, we know that exposure to alcohol advertising is associated with higher consumption. But this is an area that remains under-investigated with women. So this study sought to uncover which women are more likely to be impacted by advertising and which groups of women are more likely to view advertising and feel motivated to drink. I looked at the internal characteristics, the attributes of individuals, and found that women who consume more alcohol per week are more likely to be influenced by advertising. Consumption per week is significantly associated with the impact of alcohol advertising. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given the finding that regular and everyday drinkers were more impacted by advertising than those who drink less often. Education is statistically significantly associated with the impact of alcohol advertising. Those that don't have a bachelor level education or higher were more likely to report higher impact of advertising. Time spent online was significantly associated with advertising impact. Those who spent more time online were more likely to report a higher impact of alcohol advertising. And age was significantly associated with the impact of alcohol advertising, indicating that women from different age groups responded with varying degrees of persuasion to the cue to consume. The younger and the older age groups were most impacted by advertising, the 18 to 24-year-olds and the 55 to 64-year-olds. The younger may have not developed their critical thinking skills, and the older age group had less education. So this could be due to reduced access to university level education and their earlier years. This may indicate that critical thinking developed through university education could be a key protective factor. However, further multivariate analysis needs to be completed. So why this matters? So advertising is the vehicle that connects consumers to alcohol products. Online advertising represents approximately 50% of the advertising spending, and more people spend more time on social media daily than they do watching television. Social media is a major advertising vehicle, and technology has altered the way we receive, share, and interact with information and purchase products. Social media often has lower costs than traditional advertising, and it presents opportunities to improve brand awareness and increase sales. And all of this makes online advertising very attractive for Big Alcohol. Concerns regarding the impact of advertising are prominent, and how alcohol can be harmful for children. We try to protect the more vulnerable members of our society. And previous research on 12 to 17-year-olds has found that exposure is strongly associated with drinking patterns. And so this study seeks to address this knowledge gap in the dearth of research that exists on the influence of alcohol advertising on women. So this phase was about pulling back the curtain on the tactics of big alcohol. Many women spend more time on social media than they do watching television. These platforms are like gold to advertisers in how they allow for the harvesting of information from individuals, which they in turn use to model the individual's characteristics and their future behaviours. Imagine a doll and advertisers pulling the strings. They use these powerful algorithms and they can target their audience much more accurately than is possible with traditional media. This is a billion-dollar industry. They know our trigger points and how to hit them. So unsurprisingly, as women is one of the most frequently consumed alcohol products, and we consume that much more than men, this was a lot of the data set that we found when we looked at the images of alcohol advertising. Spirits and ready-to-drink beverages are also another area which women consume more than men, and they also represented a significant part of the image data set at 37%. And so this analysis focuses on the strategies used by alcohol advertisers to sell their alcoholic beverages. The 454 images that were collected by the citizen scientists were imported into in vivo. They were then analysed through open and closed coding, a deductive coding framework from the study which examined why women were drinking and their life values was used to examine what values, experiences, and meaning was associated with alcohol to sell the products. To ensure the guiding questions of what strategies are used to sell the beverage and other meanings. Sorry, I've just messed up my notes there. So the question of what strategies are used to sell the beverage guided the coding framework. Okay, so I'm going to present the themes which illuminate how marketers appeal to women. There were two overall types of advertising strategies that were identified: persuasive and descriptive. The advertisements, which provided a reason why approach, so they provided not only the product, but a suggestion as to how or why they should be consumed, were termed persuasive. And 92% of the advertisements were persuasive. And there were two overarching themes. The first theme focused on the individual for you, and the second theme was for others. And instead, a reason for drinking was the benefits that were beyond the individual.
Jess, darling, we're getting a bit. Did anyone else get a slightly weird satanic moment there, which was very appropriate to the topic, but also a frightening. So Jess, what I'd suggest is let's sort of get through this because we might be losing vocal. Try again, Jess.
Okay, so the remaining 8%, is that better?
Yes, it is, darling. Just go for it, just so we can preserve the sound.
All right. The remaining 8% of advertisements were descriptive. They were not linked to life values. They simply presented a product and a price. And I'm not going to cover that in this particular presentation. All right, so self-care. So products are bought as they offer a solution to a problem. They make life easier. Women during their midlife are caught in the juxtaposition of demands from family and career, a phase with very high demands. Their careers are progressing with additional responsibility, and their caring responsibilities can also be increasing. The social cultural context means that women have full plates and very limited leisure time. The idea of unwinding and time for self-care is something that many women crave. Drinking as entertainment, as a way of having fun that was accessible to women, was promoted as a reason for drinking and buying alcohol. As one of the ads stated, Good Pair Days is a fun, affordable and educational way of enjoying what everyone loves to do, drink delicious wine. Showing women they can drink whilst doing other activities, they stated, we figured out which drop goes with crocheting, reading and writing a letter to your annoying ex. Alcohol is promoted to seep through the home environment and is being normalised as a companion to leisure. The themes present how alcohol is normalised and it's glorified through the promise of this desirable lifestyle. Alcohol use is associated with leisure, mothering and ways of doing gender. Being feminine and how to be a woman are the cultural messages that pervade our screens and are woven into the social cultural context. Perhaps what is most alarming is that with social media, every click, like or comment that women make has the potential to increase the presentation of alcohol marketing. Social media uses a data-driven marketing system, which is designed to keep you scrolling, and it makes you vulnerable to corporations. Social media is designed to create harm. And as expected, Big Alcohol understands what women want. Big Alcohol doesn't spend billions on advertising a year without knowing their target market. And the next study builds on the narrative of alcohol and femininity, but it gets even darker. The use of interpolation demonstrates how Big Alcohol actively shapes ideologies about what it means to be an Australian woman. Is the sound still okay? Awesome. All right, so this study found how the ideologies of femininity are organised, framed and shaped through advertising. Big Alcohol are powerful corporations who use advertising to internalise cultural values through a process of interpolation. Women scroll through social media and see messages such as kids in bed, time for wine. If they accept this hail, they become the subject by acknowledging the message is targeted at them. This reinforces women's perceptions that drinking is needed to survive motherhood. We observe the lives of others through social media and the cultural values. Drinking is how you cope. Women see images of women who look like them, describe similar struggles, experiences, and feelings. The women who comment and share these sentiments about drinking all reinforce each other's cue to drink, that wine o'clock is normal and that everyone is doing it. Drinking is not a problem, this is normal. This is how motherhood is done. This creates a sense of belonging, a unity with other women, an identity. This is how advertisers use interpolation to encourage the consumption of alcohol. The purpose of this research is to illuminate the interpolation pathways, how advertisers disseminate cultural values and seek for women to internalise them as part of their identity. This study explores how advertising interpolates women as subjects and sells them identities, how Big Alcohol uses advertising to connect carcinogenic beverages with the identities of women. The analysis is undertaken of the injunctions and the silences to reveal the truth of how Big Alcohol thinks about women and their lives. Whilst previously the thematic analysis was presented of the advertisements, this now takes a more radical approach through semiotic analysis with the goal of interpreting meaning. We use the themes previously developed as the encoding and start to decode to understand the meaning in the language of Big Alcohol. The decoded process is completed through identifying binary oppositions. The first binary opposition is self-care and loss of self. Drinking, while it appears liberating and fun, actually makes you act less like yourself. A balance point exists. A couple of drinks may reduce social inhibitions and may encourage the inner self to emerge. However, beyond this point, the behaviour can degrade and become much less like the real version of the individual. Anyone who's been sober around people who have consumed alcohol has watched this transition. If anyone watched back footage of themselves after drinking heavily, I'm sure they would cringe at the things they did or said. I think the fact that memory impairment is a side effect of alcohol may be a blessing. Then we don't have to remember or even be aware of the ways that we acted. However, after another night of waking up upon feeling fuzzy-headed and drinking more than we planned to, it's easy to reassure ourselves, after all, this is normal. This is what women do. Big alcohol actively seeks to reinforce these perceptions of alcohol as normal, that drinking is how you do femininity. However, we can get caught up in this cycle where drinking moves us further away from the things that are important to us. Drinking can help women to feel in control and navigate through the hecticness of life. However, the price of this numbing comfort can come at the expense of reducing our ability to connect with others, to remember our experiences. Alcohol makes life better. This is the cultural value that advertisers seek for women to internalize. Drinking enhances food and social situations. Big alcohol even created a spirit, especially for women, gin. The graphic signifier here is the woman laughing on the couch with her friend, and the literary statement, if your taste buds lean towards flavors that are crisp and clean, gins with a Jupiter profile would be right up your alley. The signified is activated through the linguistic and visual imagery. This is what you do as a woman, drink gin and laugh. The crisp and clean flavors imply they are light and refreshing. There's nothing too heavy or difficult here. The perfect thing to do with friends for easy breezy catch-ups. There is a historical context to this sign with women and gin. Previously, heavy drafty beers were consumed in ale houses, where places that only men were allowed to drink. And then gin was created in the 1700s, a clean and light drink. Then it became acceptable for women to drink alongside men for the first time in gin joints. A clean drink, which is pure and suitable for women. So wine is signified here through a wine subscription service, the antidote to the monotony of life. With the statement, Good Pair Days is a fun, affordable and educational way to enjoy what everyone loves to do, drink delicious wine. The signifier is a glamorous and normal way to navigate life as a woman. A way to learn about yourself, to be informed and to become educated through undertaking a quiz about your personality, which then provides you with a perfectly matched wine just for you. Similarly, the advertisement presents here in yellow, in bold black letters, your friends don't care if the house is clean, they care if you have wine. The signified here is the wine and being liked. Having fun and friends is the signifier. Wine means a good time, wine for a good life. What is silenced here is the binary of why this is needed. Big alcohol believe that women live boring lives, they are uneducated, naive, and unable to make decisions. Women don't know how to have fun. So this advertisement states, it's time to log off. You have a meeting with gin, tonic, ice, and lime. The interpolation logic here is that drinking is how you provide structure to your life, how you delineate between work and play. The truth is in the silences. Women are overburdened with work and responsibilities. They juggle the multiple burdens of home and family, and they have limited leisure opportunities. At night, when the work is done, they are often confined to the home with children tucked up asleep in bed. They can't leave and go out partying with their friends. They don't know how to switch off, let their hair down and relax. Women are uptight. Women are interpolated that drinking provides freedom. There were advertisements that state, imagine this, drinking a cocktail on a private island off the coast of Maine. Drinking is so convenient and readily accessible. Another statement in an ad, Right now, you can't backpack through Spain and fall in love at a charming little tapas bar, but you can have a bottle of Tempranillo delivered to your door ASAP. Ole! Alcohol can be ordered with a click and consumed in the home, and it provides women with some space to imagine, to explore, and to dream. The interpolation logic here is that drinking is empowering and will set you free. The silences here revealed the women's reality and the resulting suffering, that gender inequalities, are avoidable, unfair, and due to the unequal distribution of resources and conditions. Sorry.
Jess, we're doing well, darling. What if we just move to the final milestone part, darling, so we can go into the assessment and save your voice a little bit, all right?
All right, sure.
Cool, darling. You're doing well, sweet.
All right. Where are we going to do this one? So, as I'm sure you now all realised after listening to all of that, this has been a beast of a project, and it has been undertaken during a difficult time to do research. But the finish line is now firmly within sight. I can almost taste it, like a good fine wine. There is a very small amount of final analysis to be done and the qualitative chapter to finish being written. And then we go into the 10 drafts to the final grueling finish line sprint. So I want to thank you all for being here and for listening and for supporting me in this research. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, you are a spectacular human. First of all, this is the family. Now, as we talked about, the next stage of this is sort of the scary assessment bit. So, Jess, darling, have sweetness, have some water. Now, Leanne, would you like to batter up first and ask the first question? We might go Leanne, Sarah, maybe till you're both happy that the data set's been covered, and then we'll move out to wider questions. So, Leanne, start us off, mate.
Hi, Jess. Firstly, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and congratulations on your research. I think this is a really wonderful project, and I think you've done an extraordinary job wrangling a bit of an octopus, which is, but you've done a really excellent job. And I read your thesis and it's all there. And I think it's just going to be ordering and sharpening and Tara's 10 drafts about seeing it as one thing rather than at the moment, I think you're seeing it as 9 or 10 separate things, which is fine at the moment. That's exactly where you should be. But getting to the finish line is going to be about how is this whole thing actually working together. So I guess I'm going to ask you a really awful question, and I apologise so much for this because this was done to me in my PhD, but there's a reason why I want to do this to you, not to be awful, but because I'm interested in your response to it, actually. I really would be interested. So you talk about patriarchy in your thesis, and I think that's such an important intervention because you talk about coping early on. And when I was reading early on, I was thinking, okay, what do you mean by coping? And then you brought up the idea of patriarchy, and I think that's super important. But what you don't talk about is feminism, and I'm not, and maybe you don't need to talk about feminism, and that's absolutely okay. But I'm really interested in why that absence, because I think maybe in your data set that maybe there's scope to talk about the failure of feminism and how that relates to patriarchy, and that when women get to a certain age, they realise that feminism has failed, but maybe they don't have a language to put around that or even a consciousness of that failure. And I think that maybe there's space for that, and I'm interested in your response about, if you've deliberately taken it out, why that is, and that's fine, or if you think there's maybe scope, because I think there's also something about the stories that women do not tell themselves, the stories that women do not speak, because I like the start of your thesis and the book ending of your thesis where you tell these stories, and I think there's something about the stories that women tell themselves when they get to a particular, as they move through particular age groups.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that was a big one. Okay. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, this is an octopus. And like I've sort of stated, there was a massive pivot that had to occur as part of the research. And some of the data sets were collected before that pivot and some of them after. And I guess I'm already crossing so many disciplines here and so many different, you know, theories are woven into this research. And I always knew that, you know, feminism was really important. And it certainly, you know, is having an effect here. I certainly don't deny that. And I think after hearing what you've said, this probably is something that I need to address. I guess what I told myself, the stories that I told myself before that was that this is a huge, like, big thing for you to try and bring into an already huge PhD. And so I guess I was a little reluctant to kind of go down that path of feminism. But I mean, if I've already gone down the path now, which I didn't want to, but I just kind of got there, and having to deal with like patriarchy, then it's kind of hard to talk about that without talking about feminism. Like the two are obviously a response, they're coupled. So yeah,
but
I
Jess,
probably do need to do it.
Jess, not necessarily. If I can just bounce back at Leanne, because I was the one that asked you that question 20 years ago. And yes, karma is a mongrel, isn't it? Leanne, the question is, Jess has diagnosed patriarchy as an asymmetrical power system. And could the patriarchal nature of power be diagnosed without feminism being an outcome or a frame for that? Now, I think the answer is yes. But I think what you've specified for Jess and I to work on is page 3 of the thesis. What is she not talking about? But would that be enough, Leanne, to focus on this is about patriarchy, this is about uneven power relations and what happens in that space?
Yeah, look, I was just thinking about the relationship between coping and patriarchy, and I just felt I needed a little more. It starts to come out, I think, in chapter 9, I think it is, in your work, that you really start to unfurl and unpack this stuff. And I think maybe when you get into the 10 drafts, that will become crunchier and it'll fill those gaps more and you won't need that. But my only suspicion is that as women age, you know, young women are in the zone. They're buying all the narratives that are appropriate for young women at the time. And then something happens as women age, when they've done the narrative, they've done all the things they're supposed to do, when they get to a certain age, and maybe they go, oh crap, I've done all the things I was supposed to do in my life and it's still crap. And I think that has to do with, you know, the idea that, that women are still being heavily defined through mothering, that mothering is the most rewarding and an important thing you'll ever do. And perhaps it is, maybe not. And, you know, the idea that you can have it all and you can be it all, which is a feminist narrative, that you can do everything. And women get to a certain age and go, well, I've done everything and it sucks. Nobody's helping me and I don't have time for myself, and I'm stressed out. I'm having, there's a reason why women are good at citizen science, because they're the responsible ones. They do everything all the time. And you know what I mean? They're the adult in the room all the time.
Wow.
And I think there's something to be said there.
I do too, Leanne. I think that's profoundly helpful. I've got great notes there. This is recorded. Jess, brilliant point. You see why Leanne's here. Let's go to the woman, the myth, the legend that is SC. SC, batter up.
Thank you. I agree with Leanne. I think that there's a place in here for feminism, but and what you said, Leanne, so true. Jess, congratulations. That was a great read. Can I also say great presentation? And I think you've got so much going on in there. which you're doing really well. And when you get that red thread and you tighten it, it's all going to work. You've got Sartre, you've got Althusser, you've got citizen science, which I love, by the way, in there. It's all going on with social media. One thing that I'd like to ask you about is algorithmic culture. Okay, so the impacts of algorithmic culture on advertising. I've noticed that you use Nick Carr's work, which is excellent. But I think maybe there's room in there for Ted Striphas talking about the culture of algorithms, because I don't think it's enough to say social media is designed to create harm. I think we need to look a little bit more deeply at that, and the platform power, platform hegemony, those kinds of things need to perhaps be addressed. The other thing that I wanted to raise is, do you look at, I don't think you do, and perhaps there's no data out there at this stage around it, non-binary people and trans men experiencing these issues with alcohol and breast cancers or chest cancer. So I think that's something that needs to potentially be addressed. Even though women are your focus, just maybe even making a reference and saying that there's a lack of data in this space, and that's something for further research, perhaps. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to ask you, sorry, I'm asking too many questions, is because you're doing a Doctor of Medicine, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, as well as a Doctor of Philosophy. Yeah.
Yes.
So what was the most surprising finding for you, given your background?
In this research?
Mm.
Oh, goodness. All the big questions. So
Sorry.
do you want me to address your final question?
Yeah,
or?
go with the final
Yes,
first.
start with the final, then we'll go back. So what was the big surprise, Jess?
I never thought I'd be writing a PhD about patriarchy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be engaging in cultural studies, particularly while stuck in the very reductionist biomedical view of the world that medicine has. So I guess for me, one of the most surprising things is where I went in terms of disciplines and what kind of theories I engaged with, and that my brain didn't explode while I was trying to engage in all these very diverse ways of thinking. I actually found it quite a complementary process, and that one way of thinking really helped me to think about, how I thought about research really helped me when I was in medicine, and even medicine really helped me when I was in the research, because in the research I can see things, what's happening inside the body, inside the cells, all the neurotransmitter stuff is like, simple, right? Because I've done medicine. And then to be able to see that all the way through the individual, the behavior, the social structures, and get to talk about stuff like, algorithms and, big alcohol and patriarchy. It's really neat being able to see through the whole continuum like that. So I don't know if that's surprising and enjoyable, but hopefully that's an answer to your question.
It is, and it's an excellent answer. Yeah.
It's and of course the next question involved, and I'm terribly interested in this, and she is working through it, is the non-binary trans variable, because it's one of those fascinating cases, the consciousness and the deployment of that language and that community and that theorization, of course, occurred while she was doing a study, and in fact after the surveys were configured. So putting that problem into the work, because we've all been on an incredible journey of consciousness. It's 2018, and so the theses that have been written during this period have some of that historic legacy language, and we have to acknowledge that legacy language and transcend it in future work. So, but it's a great point. So Jess, do you want to address that variable?
Yes. So I collected the data, right? I was interested, I guess, in my very, small, narrow view, that I wanted to have data about women, right? Because women experience much higher rates of breast cancer. Yeah. And in doing that, I did actually have it on my survey that there were options to, identify as many different types of genders. And I had one person identify as being non-binary. And this is out of all the people that undertook the survey. But it was promoted as being targeted at women. Yeah. And so I took this to a previous supervisor, who, you know, had a quantitative background. And I said, oh, well, what should I do with this particular participant's data, you know? And they said, well, just erase them from the data set. I felt fairly uncomfortable about this response, but I guess from a purely, you know, quantitative sort of methodological, you know, method type of view, that kind of made sense. But I guess it alerted me that there was this overarching problem, but I was a bit too in deep at that point to be able to pivot and to change things.
Yeah.
But I do agree that it is important, and I certainly, you know, don't want to be, you know, excluding groups of people. And I do think that it's something that needs to be, you know, a part of the thesis and at least written about and acknowledged. I think that's really important.
So I think your current supervisory team are very excited to see a section of your conclusion that mentions that particular advice, and that human being should be erased, and that at the conclusion of the thesis, that human being is brought back for future analysis and future study, that they are a worthy human.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Fantastic. Should I go? We might do one more with Leanne and one more with SC. No, SC had the big question. One more from Leanne, one from SC. We'll open it to the crowd, noting the time, colleagues. Leanne? Mute, darling.
Yeah, got it. Okay, my question is, you do this, the cool model that you have of good faith, bad faith. My suspicion is that a lot of us exist in the bad faith space a lot of the time, and I think that's cool. I think that's human. But I guess my question to you, and I think you're already dancing around it, but I just want to bring it to the forefront of your consciousness, really, in terms of how you, when you write the, you know, this thesis up, how are, in this kind of bad faith, good faith binary that you're kind of situating, are you / how are you going to potentially avoid reinforcing this relationship or connection between women and being responsible, if you even think that's necessary? So the idea that you want people to be living in good faith, is that going to translate into women yet again having another responsibility to you know, to manage their drinking, which, you know, do you kind of see where I'm going with that one, or do I need to be clearer?
So it's like another burden. It's like just another thing that women have to get organised.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess when I talk about, you know, the C word, that's what I think of, is that it's just another thing we're blaming the individual for. Is that what you mean? Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like, if this model of, you know, good faith, bad faith, which is very binarized, and that's not necessarily a problem. You know, I'm not suggesting that's a problem. But the idea of wanting to shift women from bad faith living into good faith living, how are you going to present a narrative around that that's not just about, well, here's another thing to be responsible for?
Yes. I guess, well,
yeah.
Well, Sartre would definitely say that they are responsible and they can't shirk that responsibility. So that's indeed what existential philosophy is all about. It's about accepting that responsibility. And so for me, that's what I liked about the good faith, in that if they are drinking and they are doing it in ways that align with their life values, then they shouldn't be judged, they shouldn't be blamed, they don't need to be targeted. We should just let them live their lives and be happy. But the people that, or when they drink, because obviously people can be good faith and then the next day a bad faith drinker, that's the time, I guess, that bad faith drinking time is when we can intervene. And so while I guess it's a binary, it's also more about, I guess, drinking occasions. And it's about rationale rather than blaming an individual.
Nice.
Does that kind of help?
That's a nice one.
Can I ask a follow-up?
You can.
So Jess, can I ask a follow-up to that question? I forgot to mention. Like,
Should I go to a scene, come back?
yeah, go ahead.
Go to a scene, come back. Write it down. He's got a very bad cold. Yeah, so
Okay.
Okay. So I think that there might be a case here, because you've done neoliberalism really well and the individualizing of responsibility. I think that there might be a case here to put in a bit of post-feminist theory around that. So linking in there with what Leanne has just spoken about. So maybe just a taste of post-feminist theory. And of course, the discourses they run in tandem with neoliberalism as well. They're different, they're distinct, but there might be a case there for that to actually just flesh this out a little bit. One thing I was going to say is, because in RRR Australia, so rural, regional and remote Australia, we know that there's a lack here. There's a lack of support, detox facilities, rehabilitation for drinking. Okay, people are dying. This is a really important research project that you're doing. I would love to see this go, that roadmap or framework, go somewhere else. Are you thinking perhaps of, because research is important of itself, but are you thinking perhaps of teaming up with a strategic communication team and creating a public awareness campaign? Kirsty O'Callaghan's here. We can all do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful. I mean, I would love to get this out there, especially in places where it's most needed. I mean, that sounds great.
So I was thinking maybe of Shanna One, Sober in the Country, and then a breast cancer organisation, maybe one, I love pink, but maybe one that's not, heavily covered in pink, together. And that would be fantastic for further public translation of your very important research.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a wonderful idea.
Do you now understand why SC was invited as one of the assessors, Jess?
Yes, I do. Well, both of them have shown their excellence, and their contributions have been great. Thank you.
SC, on behalf of the two supervisors, I think my 94-year-old father would say, we'll bite your bloody arm off. So we'll take that opportunity for dissemination. That is magnificent. Thank you.
So Jess, SC kind of just answered the question I was going to ask you, because you mentioned the importance of education beyond university level and the difference in the data between being educated and not educated. How do you see that we could educate the people, or how can we lift the game, right? SD just kind of answered that in one way. Have you got any other ideas?
Is this for me?
No, it's for Jess.
It was for Jess.
Jess.
Take over.
Yes, so I guess education, it kind of has that inoculation effect, but I really think it's about critical thinking. And so there has been some other research done with younger people, which has used, I guess, a very brief form of education and developing those critical thinking skills through alcohol literacy interventions. And you can do this particularly aimed at social media as well. And so I think that presents a really interesting solution that might work for women too.
That is fantastic. Colleagues, I'm conscious of time. Is there anybody on the call? And obviously wonderful Kirsty's in, so we've got a profound expertise in. We've got Queen Maeve, we've got so many people. Has anyone got just even a little question they'd like to ask from the floor? Because we would love to hear from you. And Roland's in. Hello, brother. Good to see you, mate. Fantastic. Kirsty, do you want to have a go? I mean, obviously you've got such an expertise in this area, don't you?
I don't know. Jess, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your research and your journey. I'm only at the beginning of mine. I'm just about to do my confirmation. So I popped in today with all the geniuses in the room. So and I think it's wonderful, and I think it's wonderful how you pivoted, and it's such important work, as Sarah was saying. I think the main thing to remember as you do it is that ability to take your research to the people. And have it carry on from there as well as expand on the limitations as you go academically. And I'm more than happy to stay in contact with you and help you with any part of communicating your research and things like that as you go along. But it's amazing, and really enjoy the next couple of months as you do those next 10 drafts, which I didn't know about. Thanks for sharing that.
Don't worry, I'll make her life a living hell. I know wonderful Jane's comment. Jane, love you, good energy, my queen. And Maeve to finish us off. Beautiful. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me and for inviting us all. And stunning, Jess, really stunning. And unbelievable, Leanne McRae and SC. Wow. I did have a lot of bodily, visceral discomfort. And I doubt that this is going to be short, but I'm going to try. Because of the Sartre good faith, bad faith women thing. So I was really grateful to Leanne for taking us further with that, because I was left thinking, this is just me. This is just me, which, you know, fair enough. But there was, for something to do with my brain, you know, and I have a lot of neurodivergent people around me. I don't consider myself neurodivergent, but I'm absolutely surrounded by neurodivergence. And I just kept feeling a sense of judgment in the Sartre good faith, bad faith. And I just kept feeling, I didn't quite articulate it inside myself enough to say, oh, women are being blamed again. But I totally get that now that it's been articulated. But for me, I was just thinking about all the people who didn't have an opportunity to get educated, all the people who, you know, diversity of all sorts of kinds just wouldn't have allowed them. And if we look at the good faith and with the strong statistic of people being educated with a bachelor, and I just, you know, my head just sort of explodes a bit, because I just can think of so many people I know who didn't get that opportunity, can't take that opportunity perhaps because of neurodivergence, just simply cannot do it even if they want to. And so there's just a, you know, and I suppose in a way it reminded me of cognitive dissonance, the good faith, bad faith. Yeah. And so it was like, first I was like processing that way, but then I was just really aware of my body, and I just really felt a very deep judgment in that work, in that theory. So I'm happy to throw that out, stop talking, but I was so glad Leanne brought it up, because I was quite disturbed.
Yes, Maeve, that was beautifully articulated. I'm going to say you and Jamie have always been linked. He wrote down cognitive dissonance on the way through. So, Jess, Maeve has been a light of all our lives. Any comment as a final engagement with the amazing Maeve?
Well, yes, this research is difficult. It's very emotive. No matter, you know, which way you come at it, it's certainly, I get the whole visceral reaction. And people either love bad faith or they hate it. It is something which really divides people, and they are very strong about. But I do agree, I need to be sensitive when I handle that and make sure that it's not just the extremes that we talk about, you know, the shifts, and avoid that sort of individual blaming approach, because we know that the world is not fair, and we don't have equal access to education and resources, and there are all these other barriers which impact on some people a lot more than other people. So I would hate for them to feel that they're responsible for their breast cancer as well.
Yeah. If I could just very quickly, linking that with the way that Leanne brought that up, and just putting that into your 10 drafts as an acknowledgement of where, again, I think you mentioned the third page of all the things that you can't do.
Yes.
That would be a way to handle that. I'll be quiet.
I agree, Maeve. So it's about us prioritising much more the asynchronous nature and the asymmetrical nature of power early on, and the consequences of that, the iterations of that power and justice all the way through the thesis. And I think that will then just bounce off the depths of despair, really effective. Brilliant.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can jump in. I think the core, at the core of the thesis, is the reason why we drift into the bad faith space, and that's okay. And I think that's important to be like, when you're in that space, it's okay to actually be there for a moment. You know, maybe you don't want to live there, You know, and I think that's what your research is trying to do, Jess. I think you are trying to acknowledge that, you know, this is that this is something that exists, and that, you know, but it's important to write that through. So as Maeve's pointed out, that it isn't a judgment, it's rather an identification and an understanding, so you can develop the literacy to understand when you're there and to be okay when you're there, but to not take it on as another corrosive element that keeps you there.
Yeah.
I
feel like that's my conclusion pretty much right there.
I think it's just a conclusion. Estee, did you want to put in another comment, gorgeous?
It's just a comment. I would like to say, Jess, when I read your thesis, I got a bit emotional at the beginning. But it's not the whole thing's not about emotion, but I do think you're really honouring the women you spoke about early on. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. It's so important.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's really great to hear.
This has been an incredibly moving Monday for many of us. Not me, can I say, not us. It has been a public holiday. I thank you for sharing the space and this time. We congratulate Jess. We wish Jess every happiness and hope and success. And you think you've got a bad couple of months in front of you. She has to put up with Jamie and I. I thank Jamie Quinton for being an amazing co-supervisor. Can you imagine? She's got a physicist helping her with quant. Hello, thanks for playing. Can I thank SC and Leanne, two of the truly outstanding assessors I've ever seen. You can see how great external assessors can transform a thesis. And colleagues, I thank all of you for your time and your support and your expertise. Enjoy a very nice glass of sparkling mineral water now, and I wish you every success going forward. Much love from us. Kia ora all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah. Good luck, Jess. You'll be great.
Thank you. Cheers.